Hello and welcome to today's video. In this presentation, we will be discussing about the topic CPU scheduling, primitive and non-primitive. I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation to help illustrate the key point. So without further delay, let's dive in. As you can see, this is the index slide which provides an overview of the topics we will be covering. Let's quickly go through the different sections. Firstly, we have the introduction. In this section, we will provide a brief overview of CPU scheduling. After that, what is CPU scheduling? A scheduler to do that, types of scheduling, and difference between primitive and non-primitive scheduling. So here is the introduction slide. CPU scheduling plays a crucial role in operating systems by allowing processes to utilize the CPU efficiently and effectively. Two primary approaches to CPU scheduling are primitive scheduling and non-primitive scheduling. In this presentation, we will explore the concepts, advantages, and considerations of both primitive and non-primitive CPU scheduling algorithms. So now, let's talk about what is CPU scheduling. So, what is CPU scheduling? CPU scheduling refers to the switching between processes that are being executed. It forms the basis of multi-programmed systems. This switching ensures that CPU utilization is maximized so that the computer is more productive. So now let's talk about scheduler. A scheduler is the OS component that decides which process will use the CPU at any point in time. The scheduler acts in four cases. First is when we need to switch a process from the running state to the waiting state, typically due to an input-output request. Second is when a processor terminates or finishes. Third is if a process transitions from running state to the ready state, typically due to an interrupt. And the last one, finally, when a process transitions from a waiting state to a ready state. The first two scenarios are straightforward. A process in the ready queue will be chosen from execution. Non-primitive scheduling allows switching only in these two cases. Primitive scheduling admits the third and fourth scenarios. Now, let's talk about types of scheduling. There are two types of scheduling. First, primitive scheduling and non-primitive scheduling. Now, what is non-primitive scheduling? This is the type of scheduling algorithm in which a process runs till it finishes or goes to the wait state. We can't interrupt it while it's running. Here are some examples of non-primitive scheduling. Non-primitive scheduling algorithm includes the popular first come first serve algorithm, in which the order of execution is strictly based on the arrival time. As the name implies, the first to arrive is the first to be served. Another example is the shortest job first (SJF) algorithm, which gives priority to the processes with the shortest time required for completion. Here, the shortest process runs to completion before the next shortest job takes over the CPU. Let's know about the pattern. All non-primitive scheduling algorithm follows the same pattern. A new process is inserted at the tail of the queue, typically in FCFS. Based on the specific algorithm, a process is selected for execution. The selected process continues until completion without any interruption. However, if the process requires an input-output operation or some blocked resource while running, it will switch to the waiting state. On completion of the input-output operation or receipts of the needed resources, the process immediately returns to the top of the queue. So, here are some advantages of non-primitive scheduling. Non-primitive scheduling offers low scheduling overhead. It tends to offer high throughput. It is conceptually very simple method and less computational resources needed for scheduling. Here are some disadvantages of non-primitive scheduling. It can lead to starvation, especially for those real-time tasks. Bugs can cause a machine to freeze up. It can make real-time and priority scheduling difficult. Poor response time for processes. Now, let's talk about primitive scheduling. Here the scheduler allocates the CPU to a process for a set period. After the time period passes, the process is interrupted and moves to the ready state. Therefore, primitive scheduling is when a process transitions from running or waiting to ready state. It considers priority in switching processes, giving room for running process to be interrupted. Here are some examples of primitive scheduling. An example of a primitive algorithm is round robin. It gives all processes equal priority and assign them equal time periods in a round or circular order, as the name implies. Another example is shortest remaining time first, SRTF, which gives priority to the process with the shortest time left to completion. Now, let's see the pattern of primitive scheduling. Once the allotted time slice is over or there is a higher priority process ready for execution, depending on the algorithm, the running process is interrupted and it switches to the ready state and joins the ready queue. Also, whenever a process requires an input-output operation or some blocked resource, it switches to the waiting state. On completion of input-output or receipt of resources, the process switches to the ready state and joins the ready. The selection of the next process to be executed depends on the specific algorithm in use. Here are some advantages of primitive scheduling. It ensures no process can monopolize the CPU. It improves average response time. The operating system makes sure that CPU usage is the same by all running processes. And last one is it avoids deadlocks. Let's talk about disadvantages. Extra time is required for interrupting a running process, switching between contexts and scheduling newly arriving processes. Process starvation can occur. That situation where a low priority process waits indefinitely or for a long time due to the continuous arrival of higher priority processes. Let's talk about differences between primitive and non-primitive scheduling. Here is a table to clearly highlight the differences between the two concepts, primitive scheduling and non-primitive scheduling. Primitive scheduling allocates the CPU to a process for a set period, but Non-primitive allocates the CPU to processes until it finishes or goes to a wait state. A process can be interrupted, stopped while being executed, but in non-primitive scheduling, a running process cannot be stopped, interrupted while running. In primitive scheduling, a process can transit from running to the ready state or from waiting to the ready state. But in non-primitive scheduling, a process can only transition from running to the waiting state or terminates. In primitive scheduling is flexible. A critical process accesses the CPU without delay, but in non-primitive scheduling, it is rigid. It insists on a running process completing before any other process accesses the CPU. A low priority process can suffer starvation if high priority process arrive simultaneously. But in non-primitive scheduling, execution of a process with high burst time can result in starvation. Processes will suffer starvation. In primitive scheduling, process scheduling has associated overheads, and in non-primitive scheduling, no overheads related to scheduling. In primitive scheduling, high CPU utilization is here, but in non-primitive scheduling, low CPU utilization. Thank you everyone.